Hey everybody, my name is Mark, and today I would like to talk to you about my Ketuo Yakuza. Right, so this is my Ketuo Yakuza, and it is actually one of my very favorite knives. I carry this knife possibly more than I carry any other single knife that I have. I do switch it up quite a bit and carry different knives, almost every other day I'll carry something different, and I'll just be in that kind of a mood where I want to always carry something, a little different day to day. But as far as this one always kind of sits out ready on my dresser, and I just keep it there. And I carry this one more than most of my other knives. This knife is insanely popular, and there are a lot of reasons why. I like pretty much everything about this knife. The blade shape is really cool. This is the first blade that I've ever had kind of shaped like this. Not only is it a compound grind with a big swedge and a flat and a blade window, it's extremely sharp out of the box. This one, before I got this knife, I used to think that a Spyderco was probably the sharpest factory edge that I had dealt with. When I first started carrying knives, I've carried Spydercos for so many years that I actually cut myself more on new factory Spydercos than any other knife. I've never cut myself with this knife, but it is insanely sharp. And I always watch myself around this knife when I'm handling it. I'm kind of careful because it just is that sharp. Even though I do carry it quite a bit, I've never had to resharpen it or hone it or anything like this. So it's still the factory edge. And this is it's like 14C28N. This is not a premium blade steel or anything like that. I think it's just down to the fact that Ketuo really puts a nice edge on their knives when they sell them, before they get them out of the factory. So other than that, this is the blade is about 3.3 inches, and this knife weighs 4.8 ounces. And that's another reason that I find it so perfect. Those are my perfect carry specs. The weight, just under 5 ounces, that's exactly where I want to be. The blade, if anything, it could be a little bigger, but 3.3, and it's actually like a little over that. It's like 3.34, I think. That blade length is great for everyday carry. I do like to carry longer blades than that. I've got some Best Techs that, they get up there a little bit, 3.7, 3.8. And I'll carry those just fine, and I like carrying those, and they're super smooth. But this one, I've got to say, as far as the smoothness goes, it is probably right up there with those other knives. And the really crazy thing about this knife is that this knife, with the G10 and the little carbon fiber bolsters up here, this is the $115 version of this knife. It's the cheapest version that you can buy, and it is also my favorite. So I think the prices probably go all the way up to right around $300, maybe $320, and that is for a better blade steel. It's probably M390 or something like that. I don't think they do MagnaCut or LMAX or anything like that, but M390 probably. And it gets you titanium and like fat carbon scales. They do have a version that it has, I think it's copper fat carbon, and I do like that quite a bit. But I am fine with this, and it surprises me to say that because I'm not a huge G10 fan at all. And I'm not sure why I like this knife so much. It might be because the carbon fiber and the bolster here and the scale go so well together. The colors in that carbon fiber just match the G10 just perfectly. It could be that out here in the center of the scale, it's like flat, and then it champers off. So it looks different than some other G10. I think a lot of the G10 that I've seen, because this is smooth actually, a lot of the G10 has that texture all over it, and it kind of feels, it's a fine texture as far as use, and things like that. It does stick in your hand very well, so it's useful. It just doesn't look all that great. And there's so many knives and knife companies that use that same texture on that same G10 that it's kind of done. I'm just kind of over that. But this G10 is the first G10 like this that I've actually liked in quite a while that I've seen. And I really, really do. I like everything about this knife. The ergonomics are fantastic. So I have pretty large hands. This is a full 4-finger grip for me. And I like a knife that has right under the pivot area on the scales, it's kind of flat, because you can choke up right here. It doesn't have like a forward finger choil, and it's got a pretty small sharpening choil. If you kind of consider it, as a place to put your finger, as just a pure sharpening choil goes, that's plenty. This, you'll be able to sharpen your knife forever and ever, and it's going to be just fine. And it makes it easier to sharpen. But as far as trying to place your finger up there and use it, as kind of a dual use choil, it doesn't really work that way. But what I've found is if you can kind of snug up right underneath the pivot on that flat, it does have a lot of jimping on the blade, and it is very aggressive jimping. It also has it on the back spacer. But if you choke up right there and put your finger out on that, or your thumb out on that jimping on the blade, it really does feel good. This knife feels fantastic in my hand. So that's another reason I like it so much. And just the overall, design, the aesthetics of it, I really like it. I like the stonewash finish that they put on this blade. I think really looks good. It's kind of what I would consider. I've had some blades done by like Way of Knife, and I've asked for an aggressive stonewash, and it comes out a little, I guess, more aggressive than this is. But I wouldn't call this like a fine media stonewash, so it's kind of right in the middle. But it looks fantastic to me. And the way the edges are all kind of, rubbed probably, and it gives it that antique look. But it's not like an antique bronze where it does look kind of antique. This is just, a dark stonewash finish that has highlights, all around it. And I think that looks really good. The blade shape, I like that it's not just a pure tanto, and that there's like a curve out there a little bit. To me, that just adds to the aesthetic. So, yeah, I've got to say, I really like everything about this knife, and I carry it more often than probably any of my other knives. So I'm going to take this apart and see what it looks like inside. Like I say, I've been carrying it for a long time, and there's actually like a pretty good amount of like pocket lint and stuff like that inside of it. So, and I've had it for probably a couple of months. I did a short on this video when I first got it, or I did a short video on this knife, I should say, when I first got it. But I haven't done like a full length video or anything like that. But I have carried it quite a bit since I got it. And so, if anything, it's probably just time to, break it open and wipe it out and relubricate everything real quick. And it shouldn't take that long. This looks like a captive pivot. I'd be real surprised if it's not. There are a couple of body screws, and from the looks of it, the pocket clip and the filler tab screw that's closest to the pivot, this like first screw basically, it's not really involved in the backspacer at all. So if I take it down, or when I take it down, I won't have to take those screws out. It looks like there's a nested liner in there. And so I'm not sure about the other screws, and this, the second pocket clip screw. I may have to take those out. And before we start, I will say these are T6s. So the body screw and the pocket clip screw and the filler tab are all T6s. And then it looks like the pivot is a T8. One thing I do want to do, because I am not really a thumb stud guy, Like this has multiple means of deployment. So you can use the thumb studs. I prefer a reverse flick. I don't know if I can, yeah, I can get that blade window and like thumb flick it out. And then, of course, the front flipper is kind of where I live. So I am a front flipper and reverse flick guy. So the thumb studs to me, like they are extremely functional if you hit them just right. If you get on this and you push it out this way, you can kind of, fail it a little bit. And so you have to grab the edge of this and then push up towards the pivot. And so if you do that, it's fine. I will say it's tuned for, all of those deployment methods. I don't know if there's one that lacks behind another one, but for my reverse flick and the front flipper, it seems to work just fine. And so I have a feeling that if I take these thumb studs off, that there's just going to be, a hole in the blade, but I don't know how bad that's going to be. So I may try and get that out of there. It's, not loose at all, and I don't know if there's Loctite in there. I don't know how easy it's going to be, and it is a T6, so that makes me a little nervous. I don't want to strip anything, just trying, to see what something looks like, because I will probably end up putting them back on. But I don't really use this, and I don't like the way that this style of thumb stud looks, really. It's almost like those little discs that are, where they tap the top of the blade and they just screw a little disc right on the top of the blade. And to me, that always looks like a complete afterthought. I can't stand the way those blades look like that. I know there's one brand in particular, and I can't remember it. It's kind of an older style of knife altogether, but it's very collectible, and pretty much all of their knives have that little disc up there. I don't like it. I don't care for it. And I almost don't care for this. It's not quite as bad, but because I don't really use that deployment method, I'd rather not be there if it doesn't have to be. And because this knife is still fairly new, even though I do carry it, I, have gotten more and more careful over the years with my knives. I don't abuse them like I used to. So, there's now is the time if I'm going to take it off and not have it look like it's been there for a long time or have damage around it or scratches, and then you take it off and, it's obvious. Like I said, the hole there will make it obvious enough, but we'll see what happens. So we're going to go ahead and take this down and kind of see what it looks like. And I'm going to start with these body screws. And like I said, this is a T6. So we're going to grab these and see if I've got to, I'll probably just start off with the second pocket clip screw. I might have to, you know what, we're just going to do them all. So I'm going to take the pocket clip screw off, or the pocket clip screws out, and then just go ahead and remove. And those look like they might be a little shorter. I can't really tell. So we're going to grab the second one and we're going to pull it out. And then that one is longer, actually. So it does go into that back spacer. The other one stops. It's in the blade area. And so the shorter screw for the pocket clip is threaded into this liner, it looks like underneath, but it stops just flush with the blade area inside the handle. But that other one is quite a bit longer, and so it must go in the back spacer. So we're going to go ahead and pull this filler tab out, and it should be the same thing. So we have a short screw that was in the blade area, and then this one is longer. So those were in the back spacer, and you can see that there's oil back there in the back under the filler tab. There's none under the pocket clip, but the filler tab has quite a bit. I have no idea why that would be. It's not an area where you'd normally have to put any oil. And this knife, I believe it was brand new. I know it was new. I just didn't get it from like a store. I think that I bought this from someone on either Blade Binge, and I think it was just a private seller. I don't think it was like somebody who liquidates a lot of knives, or, even a company that happens to be on Blade Binge. So We're going to go ahead and pull this pivot, and that is a T8. So we're going to pull that out, and it does not have a collar or anything like that. So we have that out. So now, if it's going to pop apart, now would be the time. And it looks like the scale comes right off. So there is liners in there, and there are hidden screws holding the liner together. So the pivot is pretty loose, you know, the liner against the pivot. So this isn't one of those knives that you would actually tune just with the scales off, you know, and you would still tune it. You couldn't really do that with this one because, you know, the pivot is loose now. So, but there are hidden screws there. So it looks like we're going to have to take those out. You can see how the liners are milled for weight reduction, I guess. And I got to say, at, you know, 4.8 ounces, I believe it is, the weight is perfect for me. And I don't know how much this took out, but even 5 ounces would have been fine with this knife, I think. So we're going to go ahead. I've got to drive this pivot out to get the other scale off. So I'm going to grab, I hate putting that Torx in the thread area, so I'm just going to drive it out with the end of a little swab here. And so that's a pretty tight tolerance. And was it captured? Yeah. So there is a flat in the scale, and there is a flat just right at the end of the pivot there. You can see it. And that's about the right size. I've seen some that the flat that they put on the pivot extends down like halfway down the barrel and just right above where the blade runs, but the bearings were spinning around that flat on the pivot. It doesn't really hurt anything, I guess. It just seemed a little strange to see. I don't know why they would do it like that. So we can take this other scale off, and there should be hidden screws under there, which there are. And there's actually a ton of oil. And I'm not sure where that would have come from. So it's time to get the old rag, and we're going to towel this thing off because it is bathed in oil. And there's really no reason for it. I don't believe these, everything's going to rust up down here. And it wasn't applied in a way that would like evenly coat everywhere. If you were going to do that, you'd use a different lubricant probably and make sure that it was even. So yeah, the pivot's out. I should be able to just kind of pull this blade actually. And it looks like it's kind of pinched in there by the lock bar. And I will say the lock bar, there's no lock bar insert, it looks like. That's just a detent ball that is pushed into the lock bar. So these are also T6. We're going to go ahead and remove those and get those out of the way. These are the same as the body screws, so all the screws are basically the same length except the two in the very butt end that hold the second pocket clip screw and the second filler tab screw. So there is the one nested liner, and this is the lock bar side. You can see that it does have like pretty good, you know, cuts on the lock bar to get your thumb in. They're not super aggressive or anything. They feel good, but they're not like too aggressive, and you can feel them. It's like they're actually performing a function, you know. They're not just for decoration or something. So that's kind of cool. And we have a washer that is kind of nested into the liner for the bearing to spin on. So that also is cool. And we're going to go ahead and just wipe this down real quick. All the way down. And while I have this open, before I forget, I wanted to increase this detent just a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And this looks like it is about half of the thickness of the scale off of the liner. And so I'm going to increase that just a little and kind of see what we can do. And I don't want to do it too much, but I want to go, if it was halfway, I just want to increase it to one full thickness of the scale material that I can kind of see. And that looks like about it. So I'm going to leave that right there. So I increase the detent just a hair. And we're going to go ahead and pull this blade. And these are some of my very favorite kind of bearings. These are fully caged, plastic caged bearings. And I think those are great. So we've got that going. I may measure this. Sometimes in these videos when I measure these bearings, because I finally got one of those little go, no-go gauges from Skiff because they were out of stock for so long. Even if I don't plan on doing it, I know a lot of people are, or a lot of people would. And because it took me so long to get one of those myself, I kind of assume that there are people out there who would like to, may not have, like digital calipers or something like that, where they're actually going to measure it, that way. And they would prefer this gauge, to use. And so even if I'm not going to change them because I'm kind of happy with these, I'm going to go ahead and measure them just on camera so people can get an idea, in case somebody else wants to buy some and they just don't really have a way to measure them. So this is basically the show side nested liner. There's a lot more milling on this side. And I'm going to go ahead and keep this backspacer on there with those 2 screws because there's no need to take it off just for what we're doing. But I am going to wipe that little pivot area out where it's kind of milled out to accept the washer. So we have that. And then you can see all of the oil that is dripping all over the inside of this. And if I had to guess, I would say that that's either from the factory or someone tried to just use one of those little applicator needle bottles or needle applicator bottles because those things will get away from you. They put a lot more oil out than most people think, and it will tend to weep all over the place, especially if they use like KPL original or that's ultralight. So I would, not use that. But even the original, this is like super low viscosity. And so it's, it just, if you put it on there with the needle that's attached to the bottle, it will run and run and run all over the place. So the only thing about this knife, and this was here when I got it, you can see that little bright spot there. And it's kind of interesting because when you look at it, you can basically see like it's polished and you can see those carbon fibers there. To me, that looks really good, right? And I thought about when I saw that, because that's either a factory defect or it was done before I got it just by the previous owner or whatever. And it's the only one. It's like this little bright smile that's up there just next to the pivot. And I thought about kind of wet sanding that whole bolster area, all that carbon fiber, to bring that out more because I kind of like, the way that you can kind of see down in there and the carbon fiber looks totally different than this dull finish, it's kind of satin finish up here, which I don't mind, but compare the two and I like the other better. But this is part of like it's joined, to the G10. And so I can't really do that because if I tried to sand this, I would risk damaging this G10 and sanding it also. But if there was a way to remove this bolster area, the carbon fiber, and get it away from that G10, I would definitely do that. Just on the outside, I don't care about the inside. But I would sand all of this and get it as clear as possible so you could like see into it and look at all those carbon fibers because, they're really pretty well done. I like the cut of this carbon fiber. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So we have that, and this one was pretty clean except back for some reason. So it wasn't wet like underneath the pocket clip base, but it was on the filler tab. And that was basically from oil just running all the way down here, and it weeped through these holes around the threads, and that's how. And it wasn't probably oiled there. It was probably just oiled around the pivot, right, with a low viscosity oil. And that is how much that oil will run all over your knife. If you over oil your pivot, it's going to get all just over time. It's going to get all the way inside, everywhere inside your knife because it just spreads like, like a wildfire, basically. Okay, so that's about it. The blade itself, you can take a look at the close-up there of the blade, and that little wording up there actually just says Yakuza, so that is the name of the knife. And then I don't know if, so it's got 14C28N on the other side. You can see the detent hole where the detent ball goes is not drilled all the way through, so that's just like a little divot there. And you can see the path that the detent ball travels, and it kind of spills off the blade. I will say this is an extremely smooth knife. It's not a ramped detent or anything like that. So basically what that means is they have it machined, and the tolerances are so close between the pivot and the detent ball and the blade stop and everything else, where it just like rides right on the side here, and it never really dives off. And so you don't feel that, like it's super smooth action. So while I have this blade in my hand, I'm going to go ahead and see what the thumb stud situation is here, because I really would like to see what that looks like. And again, this is a super sharp blade, so I really want to be careful of that. And I don't know if there was Loctite. It didn't really feel like there was. Those are super small screws, though. I'll tell you that. That is like a little tiny screw. That almost looks like a lock bar. Actually, it's smaller than that. Like a lock bar insert screw. And so I have that out, and I'm not sure how this comes apart once you take the screw off. So we're going to try. I don't think that's going to fit. No. So that doesn't fit in there. So I can't really tell what was holding, like it was screwed into this other stud over here. But I can't tell if that is just like a shoulder on that screw or on that thumb stud that little screw was like resting against. It almost looks like it is. So I'm not real sure how that pops off, even when you have the screw out. And I don't really want to risk, damaging anything or putting a scratch on something, just to show that, yes, indeed, there would be a hole there. Because I think we all know that. I just didn't know if it was like a livable thing, like I could put, take those off and have a little hole next to this blade window, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal just to get these out of the way, and it may be worth it. But it is definitely not worth it to me to try and put tools in there and possibly damage something. So I'm not going to even try. So we're just going to put this screw right back in there because it was doing fine. And it was doing so fine that even with the screw out, those studs were not going to just fall right off that blade. So we're going to snug that up back the way it was. I'm going to get my magnet out of here. Okay, so that's about it. We're going to go ahead and throw this back together and get ready to lubricate it and all that stuff. So basically this is the show side, which means the pivot was on there. And I left these screws there, so we can go ahead and put that kind of back together, just like that. And then I'm going to throw the pivot in there. And I'm going to lube it up first, and then I'll try and twist it and see where that pivot needs to go, what direction it needs to aim. It's probably, most of them are just back this way, like longitudinally, aim back at the, the butt of the handle. But some of them go at different angles, so you kind of have to pay attention. That one looks like it's machined really well, like the little flat that's put in the liner itself. I know other, like this one, that knife right there is horribly machined. It's hard for me to believe that's a Riot made knife because the machining is terrible. There's all kinds of stuff in that knife that Riot needs to answer for. Answer to the people, because that is a shame the way they machine that. And even though they couldn't even get the little hole right and put the flat in there, it's got like a huge burr, and it makes it really tough to reassemble. So that's not good. As far as this liner goes, when this is sitting there, yeah, it is pointed back like directly this way. So that's about where I've got that now. And the only thing that we have to line up besides that, because everything's hidden, is the pivot and this little blade stop pin. And other than that, it should not be any trick at all to get this back together. So I'm going to go ahead and set this washer. This washer is just a regular old washer. It does have a line around it where the bearing has been turning, and there's nothing on the other side, but that is not like a milled groove in there, like a race. And oddly enough, you can see where it's not completely circular. So I don't know if the machining somewhere is off a little bit, because there's nothing, even, if the pivot screw was a little loose or a little tight or whatever, it should still, every ball in that bearing should make contact with that and go around. So it looks like it maybe dipped into one side or something, which is surprising given how smooth this knife is, because it really is. So we are going to lubricate this bearing real quick. And it's a pretty small bearing. Oh, I didn't measure. I'll measure that other one before I put it in, so we can get like a good skiff measurement on there, or at least know what this size is. So let's see. I can set this, and then I'm going to swab that detent hole real quick and kind of move that right there. Yeah. So I'm going to hit that detent just a little, and that'll be enough for, however many months, a couple of months, probably 2 or 3, 4 months. And then I'll be in this again just to do exactly the same thing that we're doing now. So this bearing is 1/16, just like most of them are. So it's a 1/16 bearing, and the pivot is 5 mil. Yep. So this is another one. Actually, I think it's just like the Avant here. That was 5 mil by 1/16 also. So for anyone out there that wants to know, the skiffs that you would buy for a Ketuo Yakuza is 5 mil by 1/16. So we're going to drop this other bearing, and then we're going to put this other washer on there. And not that it matters probably, but I'm going to go ahead and put it back together in the same orientation that it was. So that line goes down. And then we are going to place this other scale and then use those hidden screws to tie it all back together. And it looks like they need to be right about there. And so these are all the same size. So the body screws and the hidden screws for the liners, which I just called a scale, I think, by mistake. You know what's funny? If I go back and watch my videos, I catch all my mistakes. And so I'll be, trying to explain something, and I'll call something the wrong part. And it happens not too often, but every once in a while. and I'll catch it. And it's not a big deal. I almost think, should I annotate that or do something? It's not like I called this a blade or something. But I usually, if I get confused when I'm talking, which happens quite a bit, folks, it just kind of makes me laugh and question, if you guys understood or if y'all, heard that and just think I'm an idiot. Okay, so that is really easy to put together, the way that they've got that. So I'm going to put the pivot back in there. And these are bearings and they're lubricated, so I'm going to give it a pretty good snug. If for no other reason, like when I'm doing blade centering and things like that, basically what I like to do is after I get the pivot kind of tight, just on the table, on the bench top, then I'll guide the blade back in here, because on a lot of these, I want to make sure that it doesn't scratch the blade going in if the blade centering is really bad. So I'll kind of like guide it in, and then I start from a place of like being pretty damn tight, right? On bearings, you can get away with that a lot, and sometimes, you'll snug it up to what you think is like really pretty tight, and the action is still drop shut and it's perfect. And sometimes you even have to go a little tighter. But if you're like working on blade centering, it's good to start with the pivot as tight as you can basically get it without damaging anything. And that should center the blade. And if it doesn't, it kind of lets you know that you need to back it back off. Sometimes if you put the body screws in first, it can throw everything off a little bit. So that's what I do. And then after I know that the blade is basically centered, which that is, then when I go to tune it, I can tune it and then keep an eye on blade centering and, make sure I don't, go over, or too loose, I guess I should say. So that's kind of how I do that. But I start tight and then kind of loosen up, as I go. So I'm going to start basically with closest to the pivot first and work my way away from the pivot area. So we're going to put a body screw in, and we're going to just snug that up pretty good. Again, these are T6s. I change my bits out pretty regularly. I think on a video that I was doing last, and these are fairly new bits, but even the pressure that I put on there, and it's not near like what I've seen some guys do online where they're just cranking down, trying to really tighten them. And I don't do that. I snug them up pretty well to where I know they're going to be fine. I just don't have to, I don't know. I'm not trying to prove anything. So even doing that, it'll wear these bits out pretty regularly, pretty quickly, more quickly than you would think. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't seem to matter what brand, The Weehaw will do the same thing. These are some other brand that seem to have a lifetime warranty, and they're no better than any others. But my suggestion is buy T6s and T8s, in packs of 10. And don't be afraid, they're not that expensive. Just throw them away when they look like they're getting worn, because if you keep using it for too long, you're going to strip something. And it's just going to happen. So now we're going to put this back. I'm going to start with a longer screw that actually goes into the back spacer on the pocket clip. And I'm going to kind of, the nesting on that pocket clip is not bad. There's still a little play, just, inside its little milled out area in the scale. So I'm going to kind of center that up and get it kind of where I want it, and then snug that up. And then put the second screw in and kind of go like that. And I always start backwards with the threads until I feel the thread drop in, because I don't want to strip anything or cross thread anything. And so that is on there, and it's plenty tight. I'm not going to, Nothing crazy is going to happen. It's just in my pocket and a little use every now and then, you know. I don't need a torque wrench for this stuff. They're just little tiny screws. So we're going to kind of snug that one up a little bit, and then after I get the other one up or in there, we will get it off the bench and snug it up for real. And we are almost out of here. So now it's time to tune. My blade centering is fine, and I did increase the detent a little bit. And the detent feels pretty good. It's not as crispy as some that I've had, but I did definitely increase it a little bit. And I will say the only thing about this knife, and it happened right when I got it, new out of the box, I guess it had been sitting there a while. The detent ball had been sitting in its little detent hole for a while. And so the first time you flip it, it can feel different, you know, that first couple of times than it's going to feel, you know, after that. And without any adjustments or anything else, it's just kind of working it, you know, especially a new one that's just been sitting in a box for a long time, closed up, and that detent ball just kind of, you know, really sets into its little hole there. And so when I first got this, you know, I'm a front flipper guy, and one of the reasons I like this knife is because it had a front flipper. So I was like, yeah, let's get it. So when I got it out of the box, I grabbed it and I was going to flip it, and it was so kind of stuck in there that it didn't move. And the jimping is actually pretty aggressive in this area. And so I tried it the first time and I couldn't get it, but I put a lot of pressure. Excuse me. And then the second time, and possibly even the third time, it did the same thing. And I think it's not even like the flat of the jimping, it's right here on the edge. And you can feel it. It is really kind of sharp there. So I actually, like 3 times of trying it and putting pretty good pressure and not being able to do it and having my finger slip a little bit, I cut my finger. And, you know, I didn't go to the hospital or anything, but it cut it pretty good, and it took a while to heal, and I couldn't flip other knives because of it, because I was like, my finger was healing. So I felt kind of strange about that. But after a couple of times of flipping it and realizing kind of what was going on, it's just that edge. So it's not really the, you know, the flat jimping up here, although it is aggressive and you can definitely feel it. It's not like, you know, a real finger cutting kind of jimping. You know, I don't know, but that happened. Anyway, the knife is now back together and the blade is centered perfectly. And I like the way the detent is. The thumb studs, apparently they're going to live to see another day, because I'm not going to be able to get them off that blade without, you know, cutting tools of some kind and, you know, whatever. But they don't really bother me. I just kind of wanted to see what it would look like, you know. But anyway, that is the Ketuo Yakuza. It is one of my favorite knives. I consider it a budget knife at $115 for this version. And I would buy 6 more of these just to have them, because I like this knife so much. So that is it for me, folks. I appreciate you watching, and thanks very much.